another video. I showed you how to make a pinch pot, I showed you how to make a coil pot, I showed you how to make a slab pot. What else do you want to know? Oh, you want to know how to make this? This is my specialty. Alright, so to begin with, I'm starting with a much larger ball of clay than what I want you guys to be using for this project. But this is so that you can actually see what it is I'm doing. You're also going to be using my wheel, but not this one. You're going to be using a much smaller wheel, so that's actually going to prevent you from working with a larger ball of clay like this. First thing you want to do, smack down your ball of clay on the wheel. You're then going to turn on the wheel and pat it to center-ish. Now you can see that the ball will move, and it will move around easily until you take a sponge. I'm gonna get a little bit of water here. Wow, that's cold. And you're going to wet the surrounding area. You're going to push in to the ball of clay, and you'll see that down here, it sort of now looks like a mushroom. This has pressed the ball of clay into the wheel. And you're gonna get the rest of the wheel nice and wet. And this is the start of all the difficulties of throwing, and that is centering. You're gonna start with your hand. The heel of your left hand needs to rest 90 degrees from you. You need to press the middle of your forearm, right here, into the rim of the wheel, and your elbow into your hip. This is so that it does not move. You start all pressure right there. So for right now, while you're centering, all the force is coming from your left hand. And you're going to need to continue adding water, otherwise it's going to get slippy. Now while you're centering, you want your wheel to be pretty much at the highest speed it can be. And one of the easiest ways to center is to create a cone. Now you'll see at the bottom, if I rest my finger there, see how even now my finger moves? If I rest my finger there, you don't want that. You want it to be completely centered so that if you put your finger anywhere on here, it will not move. Now what I'm doing right now, I'm pushing with my fist of my right hand down right on the top. But the key is that as I'm doing that, my left hand is not moving. So the clay is changing its position, but it's falling into, and it should actually be called catching more than throwing, because it's all about catching the clay and making it go where you want it to. I should also point out, before we get much farther, throwing is much more difficult than hand building for many reasons, but it is especially difficult for beginners. I've been doing this for many years, so you may have more trouble than this with throwing. Now you see, I've gotten it to the point my finger does not move, and I can move it over the edge and towards the center, and it does not matter how fast the wheel is going, my finger does not change position as the clay is turning. So once I have it centered, and you want it to be this nice puck shape, that's going to give you a nice start to a cylinder, which pretty much, with a few exceptions, no matter what you're doing, you want to start out throwing a cylinder. You also want to keep your hands, so see how my hands are covered in slip? You want to get some of that off. Otherwise, just like slip acts as a glue when you are doing hand building, it'll start acting as a glue, as you're throwing and start making your hands stick to the piece, which is definitely not what you want. Now I'm pushing down on my right thumb. And what you want to make is a nice centered donut. I'm going to pull out a little bit so I have a wider base. Now once you have it about as deep as you think you want it, or about as shallow, you're going to actually turn off the wheel for a sec. Actually, let me get the water out of the base there. And you're going to take, this is a needle tool. You're going to stick it into the bottom, and I did this intentionally. You're going to want to have about that thickness. If you are too thick, say like this, you're going to want to push down more. If you are too thin, then you need to restart because you need that extra. Let me get another measurement. Little bit of room for when we go to trim. So with that, the first thing that I'm going to need to do is compress the base. So compressing the base, because we're not working and reworking the clay like we are with hand building for the base, we need to compress the base so that we have a nice, strong substance to our base rather than just having it all slippy. All right. So once we have our base compressed, we're going to want to get our base to as wide as we want our base to be. Need a little bit more water. Now, once again, we want to have one of our two hands, depending on whether you feel you're more dominant with your left or your right hand. You want the hand that's making the changes to be your dominant hand. So for me, my left hand is going to be my support on the outside, and that's the one that's not going to move. My fine control that I'm going to have over the side is going to be my right hand. So let me get the slip off my left hand. And I'm going to start doing what's called pulling. So when you start to pull, compress that a little bit more. Once you start to pull, you want to turn down the speed of your wheel. Ooh, that's not good. Something's a little out of balance. This might end up being a bit wonky. I'll need to check that later. Alright, so right now, the issue that I notice immediately is I've got a little bit thicker on the base than I do up top. So if you watch the distance between my fingers, see, even though it's centered, my fingers are actually able to move closer towards the top versus at the bottom, they're farther apart. Now what we want at the end of all this is to have a piece that is as thick at the top as it is at the bottom. Have nice even walls. So it's very easy to get thin towards the top. So right now I'm working on pulling up clay from the base towards the top. And you never want to let your hands, as long as you can help it, come out of contact with each other. You always want them. Some people make like a bird and pull like this. Just make sure that one is supporting the other at all times so you have a nice, strong, almost what you could consider a crab claw. I'm getting a little thin here. And you can see that in the thickness of my top rim. I'm going to turn down the speed a little bit, and I'm going to do something called collaring. So this is no longer quite a perfect cylinder, so let me get a little more water. And I'm going to hold on to my piece, pushing from either side. This is something that's pretty difficult to do without throwing your piece out of whack. And you want to notice that before you take your hands off your piece, you want to make sure it's a circle again. So I need to do a little more collaring, but I waited until the piece was a circle again before I took my hands off. So this only takes very slight pressure. It's very easy to end up tearing your piece. So I've got a little bit too much that I collared in there. That's okay. I've got a little bit much slip on the outside. Also okay. Now getting water to the inside is a little bit more challenging. There we go. Alright, and all you ever need to do to get that to go away, I've got a little bit of extra down here. I'm gonna see if I can pull some of that up, or sometimes just like that, your extra at the base will come off because it gets what's called overworked, which just pretty much means that it turns kind of to slip. And you don't really want that to be part of your piece anyway because it's very weak. And you want to make sure that your fingers on the outside are lined up with your fingers on the inside. And every now and again, let me get the slip off this sponge. You need to get the water out of the inside. So to do that, just stick your hand down in there. Now when you get a little bigger piece than this, you're gonna need what's called a sponge on a stick. Very advanced piece of technology. You literally put your sponge on a stick and stick it down in there because your hand is too fat now. Okay. So I've now pretty much got a cylinder, a nice mug shape. And my walls, if I turn the speed back up, are as thick at the bottom as they are at the top. So once I have this, now I can decide what I want the shape to be. Because, well, cylinders are pretty darn boring. I personally like to have a nice shape about like this for my mugs. I like the flare out at the top because it makes it easier to drink from, and I like the belly out near the bottom so that I have a bit more volume. So while I'm doing that, or in order to do that I should say, I'm going to start pushing from the bottom. Make sure you have all the slip off your hands. Once again, it acts like glue and makes your life difficult. But you also want to make sure you have enough water on the outside and the inside. So, let me line up. And what I'm doing to do that is I'm just turning one hand into a fountain and the other hand into a distribution system. It's a little harder to do on the inside like that, but you can pretty much just take a cup of water and go like this. I just wonk that out a little bit. There we go. So now I'm going to start ever so gently pressing outwards at the bottom of my piece. You do not want to do this fast. If you do this fast, you tear through your piece or you throw it out of whack and then you have sadness. Right. So once I have that as bellied out as I want it, now I'm going to just ever so gently press over the upper lip. So see, we've got a lot more volume now, and this is a very big cup. This is actually almost a soup bowl at this point. So once I have the general shape, whatever I want it to be, you can see I have a lot of slip around the edge, and if you look down on the bottom, por favor. Oh gosh, there you go. You can see I have slip and water there too. So in order to get that stuff out, just to show you what this looks like from your perspective, never touch your piece without it turning. You're gonna stick your sponge down in there. This will first off help to compress your piece, and second of all, get out that slip that you can see coming out of the sponge right now. This is also why you want to get your piece. Man, you really can't see that, can you? There you go. And you want to get all that out of there. Now for the lip, I'm gonna set you back up here so you can see. I'm going to take a very advanced piece of technology, which I must grab from over here. All this is a piece of a plastic bag that I just took a strip of a plastic bag. You're gonna wet that in your water. Find a nice flat place. Turn on your wheel at a pretty low speed. And you're just gonna, well, first let's wrap that around my finger so that's out of the way. You're gonna just set that on the edge. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna take the slip off your lip. Rhyming. And it's also going to compress your lip and make it a nice rounded shape that's appealing to drink from. And also appealing to look at if you care about those things. Okay, so now I've got this pretty good. I'm going to take a metal rib. I'm going to use the curved side, and the nice thing about a metal rib is you can curve it into whatever shape you need it to be. And I'm going to take the slip off the outside as well. What this does is it leaves me with only the strong compressed clay. Whoopsie daisy. Don't hit your wheel while you're doing this, like I just did. It's gonna take that slip off of your piece so you're left with only the compressed clay that's underneath. And you can do this as passionately or unpassionately as you feel like. But I've just found that it results in stronger pieces if you go ahead and just take that slip off the outside. It'll also give you a nice smooth surface to your piece. And for the inside is always a little harrowing. I'm going to just take it off the lip of the inside. I got most of it with the sponge in the bottom. that's pretty much all the slip except for this stuff that's right under the lip. There we go. Alright. I'm gonna call this pretty good. Oh, looks like I need to straighten out that lip after I took off the rest of the slip. Round that off. And then make it. Yep. And at this point, the piece is as good as it's gonna be on the wheel. I'm just gonna get a little scratch out. And boop. Now at this point, we need to get it off of the wheel. To do this, we need first off a wire tool, second off a place to put it. Now the place to put it we're gonna have, you can have just a regular board, or you can have what's called a bat. You can actually throw on a bat if you choose, but since you don't have bats at school, I'm gonna show you how to move a piece from the wheel to your board. Now what I just did, you need to hold your wire on your fingers so you have a nice straight edge. Let me get the slip off and I'll do another pass through just to show you. You press down and make sure that you are not going to be touching your piece as you pass under it, and you push down as you pull through. And because I've already done a pass through, it's now stuck. You're gonna make sure your hands are dry and clean. You're then going to come from the sides and underneath. Cup your piece and pick it up like so. You'll see that it's a little wonky, but once I set this back on the bat, it goes right back to circular. You can then set your piece aside where you can work on another piece if you want, or in approximately 24 hours, I will show you how to trim your thrown piece.